Hi, this is Corey Franklin with Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're sports intensive with two great sports legends. We're going to start out with Darrell Royal. Darrell Royal was the longtime coach of the University of Texas Longhorns football team, and he died recently at the age of 88. Well, you know, someone's a legend when all you have to do is mention them by their first name, and when you mention the name Darrell down in Texas, everybody knew you were talking about Darrell Royal. He won 3 national championships, 1963, 1969, and 1970. He was involved in 2 of the greatest games in college football history, the 1963 Cotton Bowl and the 1969 showdown with Arkansas. He turned out some of Texas's greatest players, including Earl Campbell and Tommy Nobis. He revolutionized the game with some of his strategy, and it's safe to say that he put Texas on the football map. And of course, in Texas, you know, there are only 2 sports, football and spring football. Here's an ESPN report on the career of Darrell Royal.
Darrell Royal arrived at the University of Texas from the University of Washington in 1956, but his roots were from all places, Oklahoma. He was born in Hollis, Oklahoma, and went on to play for the Sooners. His coaching career took him to North Carolina State, Tulsa, and Mississippi State. That's where he held his first head coaching job in 1955. From there, he coached 1 season at the University of Washington before getting the call to interview at Texas following a 1-9 Longhorn season. Royal was an immediate success, leading the Longhorns to a 6-3-1 mark in '57 and a number 11 ranking. 6 years later, in 1963, Royal led Texas to an 11-0 record and their first ever national championship. But in 1967, Texas went 6-4, and they averaged less than 19 points per game. That's where the innovator in Royal came out, as he instructed offensive coordinator Emory Bellard to come up with a 3-back option-running offense, and from there, the famed wishbone was born. 2 years later, Texas was in the hunt for a second national title, but they had to get past number 2 in arch rival Arkansas in what became known as the game of the century. The Longhorns erased a 14-0 deficit to the Razorbacks and won 15-14 in Fayetteville. President Richard Nixon was on hand for the game and afterwards declared Texas the national champions, even though the Longhorns still had to play in the Cotton Bowl.
And that proves you deserve to be number 1, and that's what you are.
This is a big moment in all of our lives, and I'm speaking for the coaching staff and all the players.
Texas removed any doubt about that national championship with a 21-17 Cotton Bowl win over Notre Dame. Texas made it back-to-back national championships in 1970, and it capped a 3-year stretch where the Longhorns won 30 straight games to go with their 2 national championships. Texas made a couple of more runs at a title under Royal, finishing in the top 5 in 1972 and 1975. Royal's final game on December 4th in 1976, fittingly, a win over Arkansas. In all, he coached 20 years at Texas, winning 167 games. He led Texas to 11 Southwest Conference titles and 16 bowl games. The win total could have been much bigger, but Royal retired from coaching at the age of 52. He'd also been serving in a dual role as UT's athletic director since 1962, and he held on to those duties until January of 1980. Royal was known for his quick wit and his breakneck pace on the golf course, but more importantly, a lot of time spent on the golf course was an effort to raise money for numerous charities around Central Texas alongside his wife, Edith. In 1996, UT decided to add Royal's name to Memorial Stadium, but first they wanted to get the coach's blessing.
I know I was called in to the president's office, and I wondered, what have I done now? And he says, the regents have approved naming the stadium Darrell Royal Stadium, Memorial Stadium, and I just sat in silence, and I was dumbfounded. And finally, the president said, well, we've got to have your approval. I said, that's what you're asking me, approval to put my name on the stadium? The answer is a big yes.
Royal had been battling Alzheimer's disease for years, and in typical Royal fashion, he and his family tried to turn that into a positive. And earlier this year, the Darrell K. Royal Research Fund was established to raise money to try to find a cure for the disease that takes such a toll on not only those afflicted, but loved ones trying to care for them.
Feel like that I'm home. When I visit Austin, Texas.
He gave 100% of himself on the field. He gave 100% of himself to the University of Texas. He gave himself to all us as players. And it's just the way he does things. He's a special person. There's not any more Darrell Royals around. I played for Coach Royal, and I love him.
College football and Texas legend Darrell Royal was 88 years old.
Everybody didn't always like Darrell Royal, but everybody respected Darrell Royal. Safe to say he was one of the most respected men in Texas. You'll notice they mention the name Emery Bellard. We've done Emery Bellard on one of our podcasts before. I'll refer you back to it. He was the inventor and creator of the wishbone offense, and that was at Darrell Royal's behest. One of Darrell Royal's most famous games was the 1963 Cotton Bowl, where Texas won the national championship by defeating Navy, featuring Roger Staubach. And here's a call that Lyndon Johnson placed to Darrell Royal after the game. Lyndon Johnson, keep in mind, had only been president for 5 weeks after the assassination of President Kennedy.
This is a real honor. Well, it's a real honor to have you as a citizen of our state, my friend. You've brought it more glory and reflected greater credit than just nearly anything I know of that's happened. Well, thank you, sir. And I hope you'll tell that sweet wife of yours how proud Lady Bird and I are of both of you, and I know that she's entitled to about 60% of the credit. You're exactly right. She's standing right here with me. Well, let me talk to her. All right, sir. Tell Lady Bird, come on here.
How are you?
Hi, sweetie. I told him to tell you I knew that you were entitled to about 60% of the credit.
Well, that's mighty sweet, but I tell you, I didn't let it drop today.
Well, it was a beautiful thing. I just talked to Senator Russell up in Georgia, and he said that he just never had seen the job done better and one better executed.
Well, I hope you were able to relax and watch it a little while.
Well, I did for a little while, and it got kind of uninteresting after you got so many touchdowns up there. I like to meet all these Texas people I'm around. You know, I got a wife and a daughter, and all of them.
My children sat up by Linda today.
Well, that's...
My 11-year-old son was so fascinated with being able to sit up there with the Secret Service meeting that he was just excited.
Well, bless his heart, bless his heart. Lady Bird wants to say hi to you, honey.
Miss Royal?
Hello, how are you?
Well, my earnest and happy congratulations to you and your husband.
We're so honored that y'all would take time to call us. And I tried to get to say a word to you the other day.
I can't say but what I had a tiny little bit of a divided heart. but
I'm sure it was hard on Linda.
Actually, you know, I thought it would be. But she said, Mama, those Yankees keep on talking about we're really not a terribly good team. We play in a low conference where they don't have to fight hard. And now they're going to have to realize we do have to fight hard. And so Lindbergh she wasn't as disturbed as I thought she would be.
That's real good. You give her a great big hug and kiss for saying that for me.
Well, all you boys, I'm mighty proud of each one of them.
Well, Mr. President, I'm going to be talking. I'm sure that they'll ask me to say something in just a minute. And with your permission, I'd like to tell them.
You just tell them that they reflected great glory and great pride in our state. And we are all so proud of their fine patriotism and manhood and sportsmanship. And we know that they spent a lot of hours trying to, that was reflected there today, and we just, our buttons are busting.
Well, thank you so much.
You just say, you quote me, anything you quote me, I'll testify I said it.
Safe to say, Coach Royal, as they called him, was a big deal in Texas. We're going to move on now to Carmen Basilio, who died recently at the age of 85. Carmen Basilio was one of the great boxers of the 20th century. He was an all-around nice guy, and he was a credit to boxing. In the 1950s, he was both a welterweight and middleweight champion, and he was involved in one of boxing's great rivalries, his rivalry with Sugar Ray Robinson, who's often called the greatest pound-for-pound fighter ever. But Carmen Basilio's legacy goes farther than that, and to put it in perspective, we have to talk a little bit about boxing between World War II and the early 1960s. It was probably the second biggest sport in America, bigger than football, bigger than basketball, second only to baseball. Its popularity was in large part determined by television. Television was the new medium, and they were always carrying the fights, the Friday night fights, the Saturday night fights. So in post-war America, television was one of the defining characteristics about boxing, and the other was the mob. Boxing was heavily infiltrated by the mob. They were both arranging fights and fixing fights. Probably the guy who was most involved in that was a man named Frankie Carbo, and Carmen Basilio was one of the people who refused to kowtow to the mob in the 1950s, which made him unusual among the great boxers. Carmen was a nice Italian Catholic boy born in upstate New York in a town called Canastota. His parents were onion farmers. He got the name the Onion Farmer when he was boxing, and after his career, Through his efforts, the International Boxing Hall of Fame was located in Canastota. Here's a local television station report on the life and career of Carmen Basilio.
In the 1940s and 50s, when boxing was one of the most popular sports in the country, Canastota's Carmen Basilio was one of its biggest stars. He captured the welterweight title at the War Memorial in 1956 and later defeated Sugar Ray Robinson for the middleweight title in a match held at Yankee Stadium.
He was on the front cover of Ring magazine month after month, Sports Illustrated, Carmen Basilio.
Baseball has Cooperstown, football has Canton, and boxing has Canastota, thanks to Carmen Basilio. He was in the Boxing Hall of Fame's first class, and over the past 20-plus years, the sport's biggest stars have come through Basilio's hometown. He was known as one of the sport's great ambassadors, and his statue overlooks one side of the hall.
Well, as I said, he had a famous rivalry with Sugar Ray Robinson. He was the welterweight champion of the world, and here he tells how he took on Sugar Ray Robinson at Yankee Stadium in 1957 for the middleweight championship.
Carmen Basilio versus a man who was bigger, badder, and bolder than the mob, Sugar Ray Robinson. Robinson and Basilio shared a loathing for the mob, but oddly enough, had little respect for one another.
He had an arrogance about him that I couldn't stand, so there was never any love between he and I. It was Labor Day weekend, 1952, and my wife had never been to New York City. We're walking down Broadway. This big Cadillac pulls up with Ray Robinson and his entourage. I walked over and I introduced myself, and they gave me the biggest brush off, and I felt so embarrassed. And I said, I'm going to fight that son of a bitch and kick his ass someday. 5 years later, I finally got a crack at him. When I fought Sugar Ray Robinson in Yankee Stadium, this was a boyhood dream, to fight in Yankee Stadium and win a world championship. And I was always a Yankee fan, so I argued to get the Yankee dressing room. When I got the dressing room, Casey Stengel, the Yankees were off that day, so Casey Stengel was down there, and all of my heroes, Mickey Mantle, Irv Norton, Bob Cerf, and Billy Martin, and all of them, but they all came down to wish me luck and everything, because they were all buddies of mine. When I walked out of the dressing room, into the dugout, out to the infield, because the ring was right over pitcher's mound. And I looked up, and I saw that crowd, and I almost started to cry. My boyhood dreams come true, to fight in Yankee Stadium for a world championship. And then I won it. That made more of my boyhood dream come true.
Robinson won't win any popularity contests around Carmen's camp, since Vassilios' end of the purse was cut 5% in order to meet Robinson's demand for a bigger guarantee.
Well, he's been a little bit greedy on his part, wanting all the money, and if I didn't come down 5%, the public that are entitled to a fight like this would have been deprived of it, so I came down 5% so that the people could see the fight.
Carmen was 5'6", and Robinson was 6 foot, which meant that Carmen had to punch up. And as you punch up, you lose power. So he had some real physical disadvantages going into that fight.
I had to put the pressure on him to keep him moving backwards, to keep him away from his punching power. So I had to move in all the time, punch to the body and come up to the head. I walked back to my corner at the end of the 15th round, and I says, I won this fight.
Judge Adi Idala scores it 9-5, 1 even, Basilio. Referee Darrell scores it 9-6, Robinson. The other judge, Bill Recht, scores it 8-6, 1 even, the winner and new middleweight champion of the world, Carmen Basilio.
I got goose pimples all over me, and I got cold. I almost started to cry, because I remember when I was in 4th grade, the teacher asked all of us children what they wanted to be when they grew up. And when they got to me, I said, I'm going to be a professional fighter, and I'm going to be champion of the world. And she said, that's the most disgusting thing I ever heard. And I was embarrassed to no end about it, but I never forgot it.
Basilio lost the rematch to Robinson in another great fight here in Chicago, although he had a great line for a pre-Muhammad Ali Howard Cosell before the fight. And the story of a possible third fight was tainted by the mob and never came off.
And the rematch in Chicago promised even more thrills.
Carmen, in all the excitement after the weigh-in, just one question. I polled 10 sports writers from around the nation here. 9 of them picked Sugar Ray to win by a knockout tonight. What's your answer to that?
9 of them are wrong.
Thank you, Carmen.
He didn't knock him out. It was a decision.
And the new World Middleweight Champion, Sugar Ray Robinson.
The public wanted a third fight, and so did Frankie Carbo. But Carbo had gone into hiding in Miami after being indicted for illegal matchmaking. Even so, he sent for Basilio to talk about making Robinson 3.
He never told me what to do. Never gave me any orders. I wouldn't take them anyway, because I didn't believe in that stuff.
Vassilios set the terms, and by God, he didn't fight Robinson unless those terms were met.
The fight never came off, and shortly after that there was a congressional investigation of boxing where Basilio testified bravely, and ultimately Carbo went to prison.
The thousands and thousands of pages of testimony and evidence on this table all point towards one inescapable conclusion, and that is that during the period from 1947 through 1960, racketeers and underworld figures dominated and controlled the so-called sport of professional boxing.
In the summer of 1960, Congress held hearings on criminal activity in the fight game. Tennessee Senator Estes Kefauver chaired the hearings. Several former boxers told of the need to clean up the very sport Mary Basilio had called the dirty, rotten game. Her son Carmen was among them.
I just don't have any respect for those fellas. They don't belong in boxing, and the quicker we get those fellas out, the better it's going to be for the sport.
Here he was, from a small town, a rural guy, and to speak up and to speak out, I think took a lot of courage.
Well, they told me, my manager, he says, tell the truth. And I said, I intend to.
Carmen Basilio, a stand-up guy. Here he talks about the greatest heavyweights he ever saw and the toughest fight he ever had. And he's a pretty witty guy, too.
There's always the arguments, and there always will be arguments. Rocky Marciano was a great heavyweight champion, undefeated in 49 fights. I think Joe Louis overall was the greatest of all of them, from what I've seen. Because when he was in his prime, he was like a machine. Those punches went like pistons, and he had great combinations. Not to take anything away from Rocky. Rocky was a great puncher. And the old story is, like I said before, being around at the right time. Rocky was around at the right time, but still, he beat some great fighters. He beat Ezra Charles. He beat Jersey Joe Walcott twice. And those guys...
Where do you put Muhammad Ali?
Well, he's probably number 3 or 4. He was a great fighter. You can't take that away from him.
Toughest fight you ever had, Carmen Basilio?
With my wife. I never won.
Here he is talking about his career and then some of the journalists who watch him and the fighters who fought him.
My feelings were this. When I'd walk in the ring and I'd look at the fans, I'd say, those people paid money to see action, and I'm going to give them action, whether I get hit or not. And they'd say, well, you leave yourself open when you're moving in like that. I said, but I'm going to hit the other guy just as many or more times than he hits me, and the fans are going to see action when I fight.
Camus has a character in one of his novels say that sanctity and heroism don't matter to me. What interests me is in being a man. And I think Carmen Basilio is a man, a good man.
Carmen and I, we got close because many times we were together in different events, and we became friends. My son was 14 years old. He died from a car accident. Basilio, he heard about it, and for respect that he had for me, he came to Boston, he stayed with us, he came to the funeral with us, and I never forget him.
Basilio was a great fighter, had all the bravery and grit that we all like to see in a fighter.
He was ferocious in the ring. He was humble enough to kneel in the ring. He was man enough to cry in the ring. Tony DeMarco probably said it best. Their 30th reunion of the night that Basilio won the welterweight championship of the world. Over the years, I've come to understand that I couldn't have lost to a better fighter or a better human being than Carmen Basilio.
Carmen Basilio, a good man. I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer Sid Tepps, and as a closing tribute to Carmen Basilio, the music from Bizet's Carmen.